Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Sunday morning chat today is going to be a bit of all sorts and about me being told off, metaphorically, but certainly stood down, shall we say. Yesterday was Wessex Orchid Society meeting, so preceded by committee meeting, which I'm now on. So it's quite a long day away from home, basically. You know, I've got to get there. It's about a 40-minute drive, and I need to stop off before I get there and get myself some lunch, because the committee meeting is starts with lunch. You know, get the priorities right here. Lunch and a coffee, good stuff. So you know, and then I don't get away till sort of 4:30, 4:45, something like that, and then you know, basically away a lot of the day. So this place had to look after itself yesterday, which was a trifle worrying, because the day before, as you saw in the video I posted, I was fiddling with my settings on the gadgets. Well, I had no chance to sort of see how that worked yesterday. It just had to get on with it, basically, so that's what happened. Lynn, the chairman, presented me with a new plant. That's several of this type of plant I've had from Lynn now. She just shoves them at me and says, "You grow those, don't you? Here you go." So what we've got is a new Miltonia. It's a primary cross. It's Candida crossed with Benottii, neither of which I've actually heard of. This cross actually came up on a Google search, and the blooms are gorgeous. A real deep, rich, rusty, browny red colour, on top of a pale yellow colour with a lovely delicate sort of virtually white with pink tinges on the lip. So I'll be looking forward to getting that to bloom, and this will get us on to the next subject. As a plant, I took a quick look at it and I thought, you're wobbling in the pot, but not too bad. But we got signs of root activity, and we've got two new growths starting, one pushing on there on the left and a tiny little one coming out on the right. So I've got two new growths on that. I've got a leafless bulb, a leaved back bulb, and the current matured growth with leaves. So there's more than enough leaf cover on that if either of those two actually mature and decide to spike, I'll let that one bloom. I'll get that out of the pot sometime. We'll have a look, see what's in it, see if it needs a repot. There was no info on the tag as to when it was last repotted. It doesn't look like the media is that bad, actually. So it may stay in its pot, we shall see. And then we get on to the next topic, that being a Miltonia. I'll just get one down. This is Miltonia Sunset. Blooms are finished now. Spot the difference. I've got a good friend at the Wessex Orchid Society, who also happens to be one of the better growers, to say the least. Stunning Cattleyas, Cymbidiums, and he grows a lot of Oncidium types, including a good smattering of the Odontoglossums. You know, they've all been reclassified, but those of us that have been around a while still think of them as Odontoglossums, because you know they were a special category. That sort of lost in the reclassification. And he'd been watching a couple of my videos, which I liked. That's good. There's so many people at the Orchid Societies just are not into the internet in any shape or form. I just think they're missing out on a lot. But anyway, he said, "Oh, I watched your Oncidium video, and yeah, and your Miltonias. They're getting too much light. Not by a little bit, by a lot. And as you can just see by putting those two together, yeah? And when a grower like that gives me advice, it's not open to debate, it's instantly accepted. And there was me thinking that there was a possibility that due to the precipitation in my stock solution, plants were missing out on magnesium, which is quite a major factor in photosynthesis, which is what makes things nice and green, you know. And without that, the photosynthesis isn't working. Paler leaves that shouldn't be don't work properly. If they're not working properly and the photosynthesis isn't working, there's essential stuff just not there in the plant. But the main thing under discussion is that Obviously there are plants that have to be classed as recovering for one reason or another. And the last thing you want to do is stress a plant that's in that sort of mode, you know, when you're trying to get it going from perhaps root loss after you'd bought it, or, you know, poor media, anything like that. But any form of stress is not good. So basically, in the Oncidium Alliance, unless they're a good strong plant, they shouldn't be in this bright light. It's putting an undue stress on them that isn't necessary for them to grow. They don't necessarily need that light to grow and become a good, strong, healthy plant with good green on the leaves. They may need an increase in light to bloom, but that's a different thing. You know, a plant that's under stress may be throwing out blooms as its last-ditch attempt to live. There is always that thought, you know, behind what's going on. And the other thing he said that is in its experience, he's actually found out the hard way, Miltonias hate fans. I know that sounds like a strange expression. We'll say, oh, you need good airflow and this, that and the other. But I've always said, you know, when does a gentle breeze become a draft? And my expression normally is that if it's a draft, you probably want to get out of it. Whereas a gentle breeze, you'll probably think, oh, that's quite nice. Yeah, there's a subtle difference. But Miltonias have a tendency to have quite thin leaves compared with some others in the Oncidium Alliance, and as such they can dry fast. This is not much of them. They're very thin in structure, and so putting a fan on them, you know, especially if you've got a poor root system, it's just going to dehydrate them. Yeah. So although you need a nice buoyant air and you need some air movement, you don't want stuff in a force 8 gale. So as far as the Oncidiums are concerned in here, we have a fair smattering up here. Now some of these got moved up here because they were in bloom, like the Miltonia Sunset. That was up here because it was in bloom, but it didn't live up there until the spikes came. Yeah, we've got the Sotoanum up there. This is a good green. There's nothing wrong with this plant, and that's actually been there where it is now for some considerable time. Colour on that's good. Colour on these two twinkles is good. This is a good green. Both of those have got spikes coming now. But although they're up in the roof where you'd think, well, that's your brightest light, they've got their back to it. Yeah, the mount is in the way, if you see what I mean. So they're not in the brightest light. And an analysis of this grow room and the basic aspect of it facing southwest means that this area here is the worst affected. I think there's a few sort of dead leaves and pale leaves up in that corner. Now that giant pot there is a brassia. That'll take the light. Don't have to worry about that one. But there are others up there that shouldn't be. So I'm going to have a shuffle round. And it started me thinking, for the first few years that this grow room existed, I used to put a single layer of shade netting on the outside, and that stayed there all year round. And then as the light started getting brighter and the sun got stronger, I put a second layer on. Well, that was 50% shade netting. Now 2 layers doesn't equal 100% shade netting, otherwise it will be dark in here, obviously. There's still a fair bit of light gets through. And that's how this grow room was. And then the second layer came off, you know, later in the year as we head into autumn, you know, days shorter and all that sort of stuff. And one layer stayed on through the winter. And quite a lot of my dendrobiums didn't bloom. So my theory was to get more light in here. So from a couple of years ago, the first thing I did was the first winter I thought about doing this. I took all the shade netting off for the winter months. And that's only probably no more than 10 weeks. Most of November, depending on whether we were still having bright days in late autumn. All of December and well into January, and then start thinking about it in February as the sun starts to strengthen again. But all the shade netting came off. And then after that first winter when I did that, I put one layer back on as the sun started strengthening, and I never put the second layer back on. Our eyes play tricks with light. I've always said it's difficult. Your eyes will adjust. I can come out here an hour before dark and see perfectly well, but it's not good light, is it? Your eyes play tricks on you. And I think the fact that I've just had a single layer of shade netting on here for some plants is too much, and it's the oncidiums. It's those types. And he also said your Miltoniopsis look like they're a bit bright as well. They should have a mid-green colour with a greyish tinge to them, and they shouldn't be pale at all. They're not from bright light areas, Miltoniopsis. Now my Miltoniopsis are down in the shadows in the main, yeah. Those tend to be the ones that I'm rescuing a bit. The larger ones down there are probably okay. They've got so many plants above them, they're probably okay now. Don't forget they never used to be there. But as soon as you get onto that set of shelves there, yeah, from now, whatever it is, where's my clock gone? I've been moving everything. From 10 o'clock in the morning, that lot has got sun coming in from there, right round until it sets. Now these shelves here don't get that bright light until the sun moves round here, on this facing side. Yeah? But that corner there gets it all day. Down through all the shelves. Yeah? It's too bright for some plants. So now what I can think about doing is that where I've got plants perhaps like a few cattleyas up here a bit squashed up through lack of space, well, there are those, I mean, bearing in mind in the brightest days, the summer months, a lot of the light's coming straight in through the roof. You know, there is a layer of shade netting up there, up above the bubble wrap, but a lot of light's from above. Yeah, the sun is at a high angle, and it doesn't start coming in through here until quite late in the day when it starts to drop down in the sky a bit. But some of these cattleyas are not in the brightest light because they're behind other plants. That might be a better place for them. Yeah, where they start getting the early light in the day. There's some up here, the Laelia purpurata springs to mind, yeah, and several others in the species up in there. I'm not going to do names now, but that one certainly springs to mind. Now that's up there, but if you look, it's got mounts giving it a bit of shade until that late afternoon. So I think we're going to shuffle some things round and perhaps get some of the cattleyas nearer to the glass by utilising that top shelf, and even the corner down there, you know, even that lower shelf there, that's in bright light. So I'm going to have a rethink about my highest light orchids, getting them into the place that gets the sun, dappled sun, for the longest time. Not necessarily for half the day, because that's what these are getting. You don't get that sun round here until later in the day. And soon, as the sun comes round, it's going to go behind that flipping great tree. So for two and a half hours of the day, midday, this place is going to be in shade. Yeah? So I'm going to shuffle some things round and take advice from somebody who's been doing it a long time in this country with our light levels. That's what you have to appreciate, you know. So, yeah. And I have noticed the oncidiums have got a bit pale over a period of time. And although I thought perhaps it was the magnesium issue with the precipitation in the stock solution, that still may be part of it. It certainly wouldn't have helped. But in the main, it's a light issue. And we also both sort of stood back and said, you know, we all worry about feed and watering and stuff like that. Quite honestly, if you don't get the culture right in the first place, the rest of it is second place. You got to get your plants in the right culture, you know, the right conditions, right light, suitable media, potted, mounted, all those variables, get the plant happy, and it will probably grow with very little food. Or too much, and it'll all run out the bottom of the pot. So you just well pour it down the sink. There's no point in chucking loads of fertiliser into a plant if it's not going to use it. It's just going to either run out the bottom of the pot and be wasted, or mess your media up. So, you know. Anyway, a little rethink. And we are getting to the time of year where, I mean, I've got Nobelies here. They're in quite deep shade at the moment relative to what they're going to need soon as we head into winter. But they're in their growing mode. They don't need the high light to grow. The new canes are coming on nicely and they're growing. They don't need to worry about the growing season. And I think that's the main factor I need to consider with the Oncidium types, is are they in growth mode? And if they are, they don't need the high light. Yeah, so get them away from it. Give them a chance to green up. Let that photosynthesis work and do its job, basically. Because without that, it's a form of stress. You know, many forms of stress, and that's just one of them. And if you've got a plant that you're trying to recover, the process of eliminating all stress factors is the goal. You know, don't leave any outstanding. Now this Miltonia at the moment is in bloom, and that's the only reason it's there is so I can see it. Yeah? And coincidentally, there's quite a few Miltonias up here that were mounted. Now they're near the roof, so they've had pretty bright light through the year. That's an old leaf. That's an old, really old pseudobulb. I'm not worried about that. But they are slightly pale. But the business of them not liking being in the blast of the fan, pure coincidence. They've got their backs to the circulating fans. So that wasn't judgment. That was just pure coincidence. But I would suggest the light's probably a bit high for them. They might do better over here, perhaps. But then I've got to worry about this beastie. So, yeah, some shuffling around to do. The stuff that's up here is in the direct line of fire because there's a fair few of these are cooler growers. They don't like the heat and they don't need the bright light in the growing season. So they've got their back to the bright light, but they're facing the fan so that they stay cool. Things like the Cuthbertsonii, yeah? And what else have we got tucked in there? This Media Summit or other. Medio Calcar or something like that thing's called. That's a cool grower. You know, montane forest thing. My Victoria Regina that's actually started to grow at long last, if you can call that growing. But it has a growth. It's better than none. You know, that's a cooler grower. So, yeah. Right, so light levels. Don't get fooled. You know, your eyes will adjust to make what you see comfortable given the light level available to your eyes and your brain analysing what it's seeing. And it will tell you porkies. It will tell you porky pies. So when you think it's good, it may not be quite so good. And when you think it's comfortable, it could be a bit on the bright side. So we'll have a shuffle round. But you can see plants that have lived over here. I mean, this is a little Hamiltonaria, I think, and has beautiful blooms on it, and it's been struggling for ages, but it's just started to take off. Yeah, I think the repot and moving it yet again. We've got a good green colour on that. Yeah, good green colour on this. Yeah, and as soon as you start heading over in that corner, you know, I don't even need to dig the plants out. I can see the problems over there. So yeah, shuffle time. What else was I going to say today? Oh yes, we have a new bloomer. Ooh, just the one. My little Orangus has finally come into bloom. Hang on, I'll have to move a couple of bits so that I can twist it round. Oh, I just see somebody just posted on the Facebook group pictures of their stuff in bloom, and they've got a Bangkok sunset in bloom. They're just showing off. I just cannot get this fucking thing to bloom. It's growing much better this year. It's pushed up quite a few new leaves and some nice big new roots. But has it bloomed? Has it hell? And the trouble is, if you give that thing too much light, it burns. You know, the leaves, they've got little purple spots, indicates it's probably okay for light. But when the leaves turn a deep purple, you're overcooking the poor blinking thing. But no blooms as yet, although it has gained some strength. I think that's the third new leaf this year. So it's growing, but no blooms so far. Anyway, back to the little Arangus. Now these blooms are delicate. They're not large, they're delicate. When they open, they're a beautiful green. Yeah? And then as they age, this spike's been open the longest, they turn white. There's a slight tinge on them. It's difficult to say what colour the tinge is. It's not pink. It's a sort of orangey browny tinge. But basically white, as most Arangus are. They're night scented, so pollinated by night flying insects, probably moths. That may vary from plant to plant. But as such, they need to show up in the dark rather than in the daylight. So they don't need bright colours, they need pale colours, yeah, and fragrance to attract things at night. So new bloomer. So not done. I mean, it's actually 2 plants on here, so it's 2 spikes per plant. So it's not quite as dramatic as it might seem. It's not 4 spikes on 1 plant. But this one's this year dropped 1 more old leaf than it's grown new leaves. And I suspect it's possibly the wood. That wood is old and tired. Yeah. So I've got a feeling I'm going to have to unmount those 2 plants. And if I do, I will mount them separately when I redo them. Simply because I took that to a show once and I was told it can't be judged because it's 2 plants. And it's obviously 2 plants. So they wouldn't judge it on the competition table. So if I'm going to unmount it and remount it on some different wood, I've got a smattering of English oak in the grow room, not cork bark. It's around. There's not a lot of it. It's quite a few of the Tolumnias are on it. But I have noticed recently the stuff that is on it, the wood's going. That wood's seen better days, hasn't it? It's starting to crumble, it's starting to deteriorate. So I think we may need to look into the things that are on that type of wood. Now this is my little Cattleya cernua, which has finally decided to chuck out some new growths. It's had quite a long rest this year, but it's going now. I think I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 or 8 new growths coming out. So now that looks like it's the same bark, but it's not. That's hawthorn, and it's rock hard. There's no sign of that wood deteriorating at all. So that can stay where it is, which is a good job, because that will be a hell of a job to get off its mount. It'll have to come off one day. Wood won't last forever. And that's the downside if you don't use the cork bark. Excuse me, the cork bark, generally speaking, is virtually indestructible. You can think of it as the chances are your plant will outgrow the mount before the mount disintegrates. Cork bark really does last. And the reason it lasts is because it doesn't hold water. The water does not soak into the cork bark. Yeah? So it's not going to rot. It's not wet. You see what I mean? Whereas some of the other bark does actually absorb the water and can stay wet. And of course it's not living anymore. It's not still attached to its tree. So it does disintegrate eventually. There's another non-bark piece. Now that piece is still strong. Again, that's a piece of hawthorn. Probably off the same log that the cernua is actually attached to. But the cork bark just lasts and lasts and lasts. But, you know, I've seen people have trouble with using pieces of wood and bark off of trees in the forest and stuff like that. And it can cause some problems. You can get a duff one and not know. I think it was a.s.a.p had a problem with robinia. Well, I had one of those trees in the garden at my previous house, and the children were given strict instructions: you do not touch this plant. This tree is poisonous. The bark, the roots, the leaves, leave it alone. This is one we don't touch. Yeah? So they learned that. And if you think if the tree is classed as poisonous, and you plant your orchid on the wood or the bark, it's probably going to cause you some problems. And a lot of that is not easy to find out. So, you know, the safety factor is stick to the cork bark, and deviate from that at your risk. You know, it is your risk if you choose to do that. I mean, I know cork bark can be a bit pricey, but for the safety factor, I think it's worth it. I mean, I've got access to cork bark. There's a guy lives on the Isle of Wight, just off the coast of the UK, and he has his own cork plantation in Portugal. So his cork bark is his own property. Yeah, it's not bought in, not, you know, messed about with or anything. It's off his own trees. It's harvested, sustainable source and everything like that. He sells on eBay, plus he's got his own website, and every piece of bark you buy has a photo, so you know exactly what your piece is going to look like when you get it. And often it's got a 30 centimetre ruler stood next to it in the photo, so you also know how big it is. Yeah, so I'm quite happy to buy from that guy if I want some more cork. So there we go. Chat about stuff and things, and I must remember this evening, because I forgot last night, to come out and have a sniff of my little Orangus, because this is night fragrant, and I don't know how far into the night it has to get. Most of the night fragrant orchids start their fragrance not long after dark, because if you think about it, the pollinators have been asleep all day. They're probably hungry, so the best time to attract them is when they first start to fly, which is early, you know, early in the evening, just after dark, like when the bats come out and things like that. So we'll come out this evening and see what the fragrance is like. I know it's good. Obviously this has bloomed several times before. But yeah, I think we're due a remount. Definitely old tired roots going on there. Some new root tips have stopped growing early as well. Yeah, I think probably need to get at that one soon. But certainly not while it's in full bloom. Now again, if you're going to tear something off of a mount, to de-risk that, because that is quite a dramatic process to rip a plant off a mount that's well attached, it does pay to wait for new roots. Same with all types of repotting and anything going on that you plan to change on your orchids. If new roots are growing, it's a good time. If there's no sign of any new roots, it's probably better to wait unless you absolutely have to. Yeah, so we'll see how we go. Oh, and the other thing I noticed, the orange Vanda, both the spikes have gone now, but I've got a new one coming, so it's going to be back in bloom in the not too distant future. And as we saw with the big purple one, these blooms are dropping 1 or 2 a day now, so they're not going to be around much longer. And finding one of them on the floor is quite something. They are pretty large, but we do have the 2 new spikes coming. Yeah, so we've got 2 more growing on now. Blimey, they've grown. They've grown an inch since we last looked. They're pushing on nicely, so those will get replaced eventually. And yeah, we'll see where we go from there. So chat about general stuff, and just remember, it's probably the most important thing is to get your plant in its happy place. Yeah, not where it looks prettiest in your house, although that might be its happy place, but plant first. Get that environment right for the plant, and each plant might be different. Can't generalize to a great extent. You could say, oh, all Cattleyas need good light, and no, they frickin' don't. You put that Ivanagara apple blossom in good light, that's what happens. Burn the leaves. So some don't like it. So another one here didn't like being near the glass. I had to pull this one back. Yeah, started to have trouble with that one. So some don't like the brightest light, but those that do. And if you don't give them the bright light, they won't bloom. The Mackay over there, that needs good light. Well, it's been getting it, and we've got sheaths, so we should be getting some blooms down the line. But we need to sort out these oncidiums, especially the odontoglossum. See now, most of mine are down here, and most of them are in a state of rescue, for one reason or another. And this is deemed a shadier, cooler place. Well, no, it flipping isn't. Not now the sun's dropping down. It's coming in that end all afternoon, and coming in there in the morning. That's not a good place for those. They need to move. But this is the cooler area because it gets the blast from the inlet fan. And immediately I just looked and thought, what's that sat there? Oh, that's my Odontoglossum naevium. That needs to stay cool. But I wonder if it actually likes that blast of air going on it. It's very thin leaves on that one. They've still got a reasonable colour, but I wouldn't say they were as dark as perhaps they once were. So we need a rethink. Anyway, we need a rethink. It's a bit late in the year to do it this year. It's not worth the effort. But I think when we come to next year, we're going to have the double layer of shade netting from halfway up. So I'll just run round like there, so that everything on these lower shelves has actually got 2 layers. And we'll see if that works a bit better. That still leaves me plenty of highlight, yeah, but it gives that extra bit of shade for when things are in growth mode, when they just don't need that brightest light. And if they finish growing and I've got bulbs maturing, they can come from that shelf up to that shelf. Yeah. If they need that extra bit of light to trigger the blooms, I've got the choices. Yeah, so don't get caught out with light issues. It's quite easy to get, not negligent, but just complacent, I think is a better word, where you just sort of think, oh, they need good light, they're getting good light, that'll do. Yeah, well, when is good light too bright? Yeah, it's reasonably obvious when good light is not bright enough. You'll either not get the blooms or you'll get deep green leaves. Yeah, but the trouble is the lower light levels on a lot of plants doesn't stop them growing. So you think they're doing well. Oh, this is growing like a weed. It's really, really good. Hasn't bloomed for a couple of years though. Yeah. There's your thoughts. Right, see you next time. I've got a really busy day to do. I've run out of water. I can't water anything until the RO unit gets some water going, which it's doing frantically now. So I've got all my water containers to fill up. I've got to water my mounts today, which they'll probably get the sprayer today. I'm not in a fussing mode today, I'm in a quick mode, so they're just going to get the sprayer. Pots are all okay. Holy clay pots are down for tomorrow. I'll have water by then. The Vander bucket will be refilled, so we'll go from there. The main problem I've got is this. Oh, there's another little, not a scam as such, more fool me, but I've got a jug filter. It's a trade name, but it's a Brita filter jug, and it's basically based on a carbon type filter, and you fill the header of the jug up, it goes through the filter into the bottom of the jug, and you pour it out and use it, and it takes quite a bit of stuff out of the tap water. And I used to get that at Tesco's. It was part of my shopping, and their prices just seemed to rocket. So I thought, let's have a look on eBay and see what we can find. So I found them an awful lot cheaper on eBay, and they're not real. They're fakes. You'd never tell. The box, the packaging, even the container, the actual filter itself is identical, but they don't work. And I thought, my kettle's furring up and I haven't long changed this filter. What's going on here? So I got some tap water, stuck the TDS meter in it, and as expected, I was expecting it to be between 250 and 270 parts per million. It's relatively consistent, the tap water. Well, it actually came out at 250, yeah? And the filter in the jug had only been in there about a week, and they normally last about a month, so it was relatively new. So I let some water go through the filter and tested it, and it was 240. They're not real. They're doing next to nothing to my tap water, and unfortunately I've been chucking some of that in there, which comes out of there and goes all over the grow room. So I think we'll go back to getting them from a reliable source, despite the fact I'm going to have to pay more. It's just not worth the risk. Last time I tried that with a proper filter that came from a reliable source, shall we say. I mean, people like Tesco's, big supermarket chains, they buy direct from the manufacturer. They're real. They're not going to go on eBay. So you've got more guarantee there. No, it's not 100%. But anyway, when I tried that before, the time I measured the tap water then, it was 270, and after it had gone down through the jug, it was 170. Now that actually reduced the stuff in the tap water quite a bit, and I was happy that it was doing its job. But when it comes down from 250 to 240, it's not doing its job. So we need to get some replacements and get that sorted out. Furring up my kettle and leaving all that stuff in my coffee. Anyway, enough waffle for a Sunday, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Oh, let's just have another quick look at this. I can't, that's why this plant is here. It might not be in the best place, but it seems to be growing okay. It really does get a blast from that fan when it circulates round, but it just keeps blooming, and I put it here so that literally every time I walk in the door I get to see this, and I can't get to see it enough, quite honestly. These are just gorgeous blooms, and it just keeps chucking them out. It's non-stop. It's been in bloom for months and months. It had a little bit of a rest a while ago for about 3 weeks and then started again. It's been in bloom a lot of last year, through the winter, and most of this year, on and off. Just keeps going. And with that number of growths, it's going to keep going for a while yet. These are last year's growths here. Those 3, I think. Yeah, possibly those 3. They're starting to drop leaves now, so they will become leafless soon. And then that lot sticking up the top is this year's growths. So, you know, they're coming on. So we've got plenty of new canes to replace these when they do run out of steam and stop blooming. But they're showing no signs of it yet. So we'll see how it gets on. Doing well. Oh, I had a chat with some people about Hibiki as well. And there's a lot around, and they all came in Wessex and Bournemouth Orchid Societies. They all came from the same place. Peter White actually had a job lot, and practically everybody bought one. I was the only one that bought one that wasn't in bloom. All the others went for pretty blooms, and I went for the plant. But relatively speaking, it's quite a compact grower. Yeah. The difference with mine is because I hung it upside down and mounted it, the canes are growing longer than most of the others I've seen, and when they grow longer the leaves are at the end of the canes and the blooms are on the bare bit, so they're not cluttered up in the leaves. So I get a nice display of blooms uncluttered by leaves sticking out all over the place, which gives it a nicer look, I think, anyway. But not everybody can grow mounts, you know. So anyway, looking good, and oh, last little flurry of blooms on Dendrobium hercoglossum. I don't think we'll get any more this year now. This really is its last little bit. Only 3, but given that this is a, you know, a spring bloomer when it has its mass blooming, a little flurry every now and again of some pretty little Dendrobium hercoglossum blooms. Oh hello, fan's just come on, time to stop filming. I have a draft down the back of my neck. How do I know it's a draft? I want to get out of it. See you next time. Bye for now.